And welcome into this edition of Cavaliers Weekly here on the Bleacher Report app, coming at you on a Thursday afternoon. The Cavs back in action tonight for the first time since the All-Star break, taking on the Brooklyn Nets in Brooklyn. Brooklyn has won 6 of its last 7 games prior to the All-Star break, and in all 6 of those wins, they held their opponents to fewer than 100 points. So should be a good test today for Cleveland tomorrow. They have the New York Knicks at home for their first home game of the second half of the season. But we're not here to necessarily talk about those 2 games in particular. Instead, we are here to talk about how Koby Altman virtually did the unthinkable, turning the Cavaliers' biggest weakness into maybe its greatest strength in a matter of 2 weeks. When we looked at this Cavs team in October and November and December and for the majority of January, and even the first 6 days of February, the one thing you could point at when it came to the Cleveland Cavaliers is how are they going to guard bigger wings in the playoffs, because they simply did not have any depth at that position on their roster, at least not proven depth that you would feel confident throwing up against a Jason Tatum, a Jaylen Brown, a Franz Wagner, a Pascal Siakam come playoff time. And then they traded for DeAndre Hunter. And on yesterday, on Wednesday, they signed Javonte Green on the buyout market, a 6'5" wing from the New Orleans Pelicans, who we'll talk about in a second. But when you look at the Cavs roster now, at the wing position, you have DeAndre Hunter, Dean Wade, Isaac Okoro, Max Strus, Javonte Green, and Jalen Tyson. 6 wings you feel pretty comfortable with if you needed to for certain situations. Now, I'm not saying all 6 are going to play in the playoffs. I'm not sure Isaac Okoro, Jalen Tyson are even in the playoff rotation. Javonte Green, probably not. But for the final 28 games of the regular season, having the ability to mix and match different wings against different teams based on what you need, more defense, more rebounding, more offense, more shooting, Kenny Atkinson now has the options in his tool bag to mix and match to counter the opponent, something that he had no ability to prior. When it comes to the wing position, think about this upgrade from this standpoint. Before the DeAndre Hunter trade, so let's go back to the end of January. In a playoff series, for some reason, if the Cavs had to go deep into their bench, they would be throwing out a combo of Georges Niang and Sam Merrill to guard a playoff team in the playoffs. With all due respect to Georges Niang and Sam Merrill, who both played well enough this season to earn minutes on most teams, the Cavs just happen to be incredibly deep. That is a defensive liability, let's just say, calling it nicely. Niang last year in the playoffs was virtually unplayable. Merrill's never proven that he's been a playoff player. He was not in the playoff rotation last season. I don't anticipate him being in the playoff rotation this season. But now, with the moves that Koby Altman has made to this Cavaliers roster, instead of having to put in Georges Niang and Sam Merrill in certain situations to guard teams in a playoff series, and in the playoffs, mind you, the opposing team's going to hunt out mismatches time after time after time until you can prove you can be stopped. Now they're putting in DeAndre Hunter and Javonte Green, 2 guys who profile as not just good wing defenders, but plus wing defenders. Check out this stat here from Dan Devine, which I found absolutely fascinating. According to Dan Devine, who writes for Yahoo Sports, according to Basketball Index, Javonte Green, Alex Caruso, and Amen Thompson are the only 3 players in the NBA that rank in the 80th percentile or higher in all of the above: perimeter isolation defense, matchup difficulty, defensive playmaking, ball screen navigation, passing lane defense, and rim protection metrics. I'm going to simplify that because it's a lot of jargon. Javonte Green is a very good and very versatile defensive player, especially when it comes to point of attack, navigating through pick and rolls. It's what Isaac Okoro for Cleveland currently does pretty well. Javonte Green actually tests out even higher in that regard than Isaac Okoro does. Javonte Green is not an elite offensive player. These are his season numbers versus career numbers. He averages for his career just 5.5 points per game. He's a mid-30s on low-volume three-point shooter. 44.6% from the floor this season, 51.9 for his career, about 3 rebounds. He doesn't give you a ton offensively, but as an option off the bench to throw in there just to kind of change the tempo, make a change of pace, throw a long, lanky, athletic defender on a bigger wing or on a dynamic guard come a playoff time, it's a nice tool to have in your tool bag if you are Kenny Atkinson and this Cavaliers coaching staff. And the best part, it cost you absolutely nothing. He was a buyout guy. I had anticipated the Cavs using the buyout spot, and they technically do have one more, on a big because right now Tristan Thompson's really your only backup big. But they just converted Naquan Tomlin to a 10-day contract. So we're going to get a mini glimpse into what Naquan Tomlin can do for the Cavaliers in an NBA uniform prior to having to make a final determination on whether or not he's the best backup big option or if someone on the buyout market who comes available in the coming days is better. But I applaud Koby Altman for not chasing a need when it comes to the buyout market. Yes, wing was not the top priority for Cleveland, but if your options were Javonte Green, a wing who I feel pretty comfortable could play in a playoff series in sporadic spot minutes. You know, he's not going to play a big role by any means, but a guy who through the final 28 games could certainly play real NBA minutes and in a playoff series could fill in if needed. That's option A. Or option B, the corpse of whatever big men were on the buyout market. Mo Bamba is the main guy that people were clamoring for, and Koby Altman and Kenny Atkinson and the rest of that staff clearly made the determination he's not much better than Tristan Thompson, if at all, and he doesn't fit what we want to do on either end of the court, or they could have had him for basically nothing. The buyout prorated contract at this point is less than $1 million. The Cavs had enough money to sign 2 of these guys, and they chose to go with Javonte Green and Naquan Tomlin. Wing and the depth at the wing position is now a strength for the Cavaliers. Don't misconstrue what I'm saying. It's not Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum level talent, but it's certainly not a position you look at and say, I don't really like the Cavs' options if they have to go deep on the bench and bring in a third or a second wing. They now have guys who in certain situations you can play and you can mix and match lineups to fit what the opposing team is doing. So if you need size, you can play DeAndre Hunter and Dean Wade. If you need shooting, hello, Max Strus. By the way, DeAndre Hunter's also a 40% three-point shooter and one of the better catch-and-shoot three-point shooters in the NBA this season with at least 3 three-point attempts in that variety per game. If you want to go straight defense, Javonte Green, Isaac Okoro, and DeAndre Hunter's a pretty tantalizing defensive trio that not only has size, but has length, has strength, and has versatility. This is the kind of thing a coach loves to have. Options. Because you know what's better than having one answer to the problem? Having 2 or 3. And sure, there are levels to this. DeAndre Hunter's the best of the wings. And Max Strus is probably the best shooter of the wings. And Javonte Green may statistically be the most versatile of the wings. And Isaac Okoro may technically be the best point of attack offensive player of the wings. They all bring a little something different to the table. And that is where the beauty comes in for the Cleveland Cavaliers. You have options. And many teams do not have options. If you were going to make the Cavs playoff rotation right now, I think Kenny would play 8 guys, maybe 9 for a few minutes, but I think the majority of the minutes are going to go to these 8 guys. In some order, you have the core 4, obviously. DeAndre Hunter, that's 5. We'll count him as the starter for the sake of this. So the core 4 plus DeAndre Hunter. Ty Jerome's your first guard off the bench. Dean Wade and Max Strus are your big / wing. And then if you want to go 9, if you need more defense, you go Javonte Green or Isaac Okoro. Maybe Jalen Tyson, who, by the way, is probably the best rebounder of the group. I keep forgetting him when I'm mentioning what these guys bring to the table. Jalen Tyson, probably the best rebounder of the group. Or you need shooting. You have the option to bring in Max Strus, Sam Merrill, who isn't really a wing, but kind of fits the category. So, yeah, that 9th playoff spot can go to a couple different guys. And if they believe Jalen Tyson's ready to play in the playoffs, then there's no reason to think they shouldn't be able to play 9 guys in a playoff series. The reason I think we're so confident it's going to be 8, for the most part, it's 8 plus a guy that gets a minute or 2 here or there. It's never 9 guys that are playing legitimate minutes, is that is what history tells us. History tells us that even the deepest teams in the NBA don't really go 10 guys, 11 guys deep in a playoff series. And that's fine because you want to eliminate the fat from your rotation. And although the Cavaliers' fat is minimal, and all the guys who are playing in the regular season certainly can and are probably capable of playing in a playoff series, you want to give the most minutes to your best guys. And Donovan's not going to be playing 30 minutes in a playoff series. And Evan, Jared, and Darius are going to see their minutes go from 31-32 to 35-36. And where are those extra minutes coming from? The end of the rotation. The guys at the end of the bench. That's just how it works in the playoffs. Don't get mad at me. I'm just telling you the truth. All right, let's talk a little bit about tonight's game against Brooklyn, tomorrow night's game against the Knicks, and what I am most looking forward to for the Cavs in the second half of the season. I love the DeAndre Hunter trade. I think the Javonte Green signing was a very smart and efficient one. And now for the Cavaliers, these next 28 games are all about doing three things. First, ensuring you get the number one seed in the Eastern Conference playoffs. That is, and I cannot emphasize this enough, my hands are going way above the screen. They are fantastic for extending to the ceiling because it is of that high priority. It is absolutely crucial, critical, imperative. Pick your adjective that the Cavaliers end the regular season with home court advantage. Why? First and foremost, you want Game 7 at home. God forbid a playoff series in the Eastern Conference Finals comes down to Game 7. You would much rather play that series at Rocket Arena, the newly named Rocket Arena, as opposed to having to go to Boston at TD Garden or New York City and play at the Garden, MSG, or anywhere else. I don't think any team outside of Boston has a chance of catching the Cavaliers, who currently have a 5.5 game lead over Boston, which is a pretty insurmountable number with only 28 games to go. But still, ensuring you get that one seed is crucial for home court advantage. 2, if you're the one seed, there is a high likelihood that in the second round of the playoffs, you will play either Indiana or Milwaukee, while New York and Boston battle it out against each other. If you're not the one seed, then you have to go through most likely both New York and Boston en route to the NBA Finals. I would much rather have Boston and New York eliminate each other than have to face both of those. Because when I look at the Eastern Conference right now, I see 3 tiers, or 3 important tiers. The Cavs and Boston are on a tier 1 by themselves. The Knicks are in tier 2 by themselves. And then there's a bunch of teams in tier 3, which are they're competitive playoff teams, but I think a lot of things would have to break in their favor to make it to the NBA Finals. The Cavs and the Celtics are the favorites. The Knicks are a step below, but above everyone else. And then there's that drop-off. And if you could have the Knicks, who are in a tier by themselves, battle against Boston in the second round, meaning one of those two will obviously have to be knocked out before facing you, that would be a giant blessing in disguise for Cleveland. It's not to say the Cavs couldn't beat both Boston and New York en route to the NBA Finals, but the playoffs is a war of attrition. It is, trust me. You talk to any player who's ever won an NBA Finals, or frankly, anyone who's ever made it to the NBA Finals. It's not, can we beat this team 4 times out of 7 games? It is, can we beat this team 4 times in 7 games after we just played that team and after we just went to war with that group of guys? And they're more fresh because they only had to beat insert Team X. They played Chicago in the first round, 1-5, while the Cavs had to battle and play Orlando in 7 games. You go back to last year, the Cavs needed 7 to beat the Magic. The Celtics were fresh. I know they lost Porzingis, but they were fresh coming off their first round series. And what happened? More guys on Cleveland got hurt against Boston, and they were unable to overcome those injuries. It's a war of attrition, and if you could have your 2 main competitors have to face off before they face you, that is a giant win. And then the third reason, which plays into that, is you want to be able to rest guys down the stretch if you have to. You don't want to have to force Donovan Mitchell to play big minutes late in the season in a game that frankly doesn't matter a whole lot, but because it could be consequential if you lose, you have to force it. You don't want to do that. You want your guys to be as healthy as possible for the playoff push to sustain the attrition that it takes to make an NBA Finals run. So that's first and foremost. The Cavs have to keep their foot on the gas early to avoid any sort of complication with the battle for the 1 seed. Another thing I'm looking for, the Cavs have done a really good job this season of unlocking the big man tandem of Evan Mobley and Jared Allen. I did a whole video breakdown on my Twitter page. You can find that. Let me throw my my name up here so you can find me on Twitter if you want to see it. I did a 5-minute breakdown with some plays about how the Cavs have unlocked the big man pairing of Jared Allen and Evan Mobley this season. And the biggest thing that has helped those two play together so well this season, and they have a 16.1 net rating this year. They had a 0.9 net rating together last year as a two-man tandem. 15.2 points higher, this season in terms of net rating than last year, a gigantic jump. And the main reason for that is they've both become really, really, really talented passers out of the short roll. And I'm going to ask Kenny Atkinson tomorrow before they play the Knicks, how do you teach passing? And how do you teach a guy to be able to read a defense that quickly and help figure out where is the help coming from? Okay, if he's coming from there and this other help side defender is shifted over, that's going to leave the wing wide open. It's all happening, and these guys are making these decisions in split-second scenarios. And I wish I could show you guys some of the highlights and breakdowns on here, but we can't use NBA footage. So just go to my Twitter, and you can see it on that. But how do you teach that? How do you develop that? Because it wasn't there last season, and it wasn't there 2 seasons ago. Both Allen and Mobley have taken a gigantic leap in that regard specifically since Kenny Atkinson took over, and I'm curious what the key is to doing that. And now that those two have become a dynamic force together, I want to see the Cavs lean into them even more and utilize their 2 7-foot unicorns as not just an offensive threat, but as a weapon, and force other teams to have to change the way they want to play basketball so they can put enough size on the court to contend with those two. It's not just enough to have 2 big guys on the court who are skilled and mobile and can finish around the rim. How about you make teams pay for trying to go small to counteract it? Oklahoma City did that when they came to Cleveland on January 8th this season. And what did the Cavs do? Well, they didn't only win that game 129-122, but Allen had 25-11-6 in that game. Mobley had 21-10-7. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. That is the first time. This stat's crazy, but I promise you it's true. That is the first time that 2 bigs have ever had 20, 10, and 6 or more assists in the same game since 1998 when Tim Duncan and David Robinson did it. I was 4 years old. 1998. Tim Duncan, David Robinson, 2 Hall of Famers. A 20, 10, and 6 2-person stat line. So they each had that in the same game. Has only happened 17 times in the history of the NBA. And I know it's not attainable every night for those two, but when the Cavs run offense through the bigs, it puts the other team in a tuzzy. What do you do? What do you stop? Do you give the wide open layups and dunks up, or do you sacrifice and drop down to help the cover and leave someone wide open in the corner? We got more of that on my Twitter. Go check it out if you want. The last thing the Cavs have to figure out down the stretch here is which lineups and which pairings does DeAndre Hunter fit best with? Since joining the Cavs, Hunter has been pretty darn good. He's only played 2 games, but he had 12 points against the Timberwolves in his first game. He had 18 points in his second game against the Toronto Raptors, made 6 of 12 shots, was 4-9 from the three-point line, grabbed 5 rebounds, had a steal on the season. His averages, 18.8, 46.2% from the floor, 40% from 3. The question is for the Cavs, how do you maximize and which groups maximize DeAndre Hunter's abilities? Is he best with the core 4? Is he best when the Cavs make their first substitutions and Evan and Donovan come out and the core is led by Darius and Jared Allen, and it was Karis LeVert. So we'll see who comes in and how that's adjusted now. But is he better with that pairing? Or is he better with the secondary shift pairing of Donovan, Evan, and Ty Jerome? We know he's played with Ty Jerome before. They won a national championship together at the University of Virginia. We know he's played with Evan Mobley before. He talked about that. I asked him, how do you build chemistry? And he said, well, I kind of know Evan. Obviously, I know Ty, but me and Evan have worked out together over the summers. So does he have more natural chemistry with that pairing? And if he does, do you try to stagger his minutes to fit and match and mirror Mitchell and Mobley as opposed to the other group? Now, he can play with both. I'm not saying he has to come out and come in just with those guys, but for the majority of his 28 to 32 minutes, is it with the DG Allen combo or with the Mobley Mitchell combo? I hope Kenny tries both. Explore with both. There's no reason you shouldn't. Experiment on both sides of the equation to figure out which one he has more natural chemistry with and which pairing he fits best in with. Will he get more shot attempts with the Darius Jarrett combo? Because out of those two, only one's a true initiator of offense. And we know DeAndre Hunter can create his own shot almost at will. It's one of the things that the Cavs acquired him for, because when playoff basketball comes around and you have to make shots over tough defenses, DeAndre Hunter can do that. Does he fit better, though, with the guys he's played with in the past? Just because of the natural chemistry he's already developed with those guys, even if it means fewer opportunities to create. These are good problems for the Cavaliers to have. In fact, they're not problems. These are good issues the Cavaliers have to figure out down the stretch to put them in the best position to win an NBA championship. So to recap, the Javonte Green signing, big fan. Costs nothing and adds depth to a position that you can never have enough depth at, and that is the wing. The DeAndre Hunter trade, it was brilliant at the time. We did a whole celebration tour for 2 weeks after Koby Altman acquired him without giving up Jalen Tyson to the 2031 first-round pick. Now the challenge is on Kenny Atkinson to figure out which guys does he fit best with, and last but not least, the Cavs have 2 big men that play at an all-star level every given night. I want to see even more from them because I know they have the ability to give the Cavs more offensively, especially in the lineups when they're on the court together, than we have seen thus far. They're not just good. They can be weapons, and I hope Kenny Atkinson decides to turn them into weapons down the stretch because come playoff time, I believe Cleveland's going to take a decent amount fewer threes than we're seeing in the regular season and focus more on getting shots closer to the rim. And how do you do that? It's pretty easy when you have 2 7-footers capable of converting at a high rate down low. That's going to do it for this week's Cavaliers Weekly. I always get tongue-tied on how they want us to call that, but this is going to wrap it up for our weekly Cavs stream here on the Bleacher Report app. If you liked what you heard, if you want to hear more Cavs takes, you can follow me on Twitter at Mike Lucas TV, and you can see us on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. We have, real quick, Ian Evans has a comment. Let's answer this real quick. Do you think this roster can beat the Celtics? Absolutely. I still think Boston's the favorite. To beat the king and to be the king, you have to beat the king. And until they beat the king, they will not be considered the favorites. But can this roster beat the Celtics? Ian Evans? Absolutely. It's going to be tough. Won't be easy. But they do have enough firepower. And with the additions of DeAndre Hunter and Javonte Green, I think they have enough to slow down the Celtics from a defensive standpoint as well. That's going to wrap it up for today's stream. We will see you guys next week right here on Bleacher Report. For now, though, I'm Mikey McNuggets. Have a good one. Peace.